Hello, dear friend, how are you? If you can watch this video, you landed on the last part of our journey, of our travel to English mastery. The most important part of our travel. You can surely understand roughly everything I am saying now. You have a good American accent and you are about to discover one of the most important things in language learning. Did I say the most important thing? Yeah, the most important thing. If you understand what I will tell you now, you will have the key, you will have the power to unlock the door, to open the door of fluency in English. What is fluency? Fluency happens when you attain an excellent level in English and you can express your thoughts, what you think, you can express it clearly without searching too much for your words. Now, I will tell you one sentence. And I want you to remember that sentence. It is the most important sentence ever said in second language acquisition. Did I say acquisition and not language learning? Yeah, I said the most important sentence ever said in second language acquisition, not learning. But first, listen to the sentence. We humans are very good at acquiring a language, but we are not good at learning a language. I want to say it again. As humans, we are very good at acquiring a language, but we are not that good at learning consciously a language. This sentence is the sentence of one of the greatest linguists still alive, Stephen Kraschen.
We are very good at language acquisition, first language and second language. We're not very good at language learning.
Who is a linguist? Linguists are people who study the way language works. They go to university to study only how language works. They study how language develops. They study the way language works. Based on many pieces of research, Stephen Kraschen elaborated what we call hypotheses about language acquisition. Hypothesis? What is hypothesis? Or what are hypotheses? Hypotheses are suppositions made by scientists that they formulate from experiences and scientific research. Once the suppositions, the hypotheses, are formulated, they are tested. So they test the hypothesis, the suppositions, with data. The suppositions or the hypotheses remain valid as long as no data contradicts them. Now you might ask, what is data? I will explain that to you correctly in a couple of seconds, in some seconds. Simply, hypotheses are theories about how we acquire language in our case. For example, when I say, I think that you eat every morning, a hypothesis. So, as long as you will eat every morning, my supposition or my hypothesis will be valid. It will be true. But if on many days, let's say Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you do not eat in the morning, my hypothesis becomes false. It becomes invalid. Some might ask, but what are data? Data are, how to explain that? Data are measures that we take of reality. They are experiences. So they are measures that we take of experience. So let's get back to our Stephen Kraschen. So Stephen Kraschen expressed 5 hypotheses about second language acquisition. And until now, the data, the experience always backed up his hypothesis. The data or the experience always supported his hypothesis. So the first hypothesis is the acquiring against learning hypothesis. Scientists have found that we have 2 different ways of approaching a new language. We can learn the language or we can acquire it. Learning happens when we consciously learn rules and how the language works and try to apply these rules. In other words, when you say usage of should, subject plus should plus verb plus object, or usage of passive voice, simple present becomes simple past. When you approach language that way or this manner, you are learning the language. You are not acquiring the language. You are learning. But acquisition happens when you feel how to use the language. You don't apply the rules. You just know that it works that way. You feel that what you say is correct. You feel it. For example, when you say, I should work more my English, you don't know if what you said is grammatically correct, but you feel it, you know. That's what Stephen Kraschen calls acquisition. And what is more interesting is that scientists have found 2 different machines, 2 different systems for these 2 different ways of approaching the language. So there is one system in your brain that works when you are acquiring the language, and there is another system in your brain that works when you are learning the language. Scientists have shown that your acquisition machine acquires language in a predictable order, and we cannot change that order. There are some structures in English and in other languages that your acquisition machine integrates more quickly than others. For example, whoever you are learning English, you will always acquire faster and first. My friend is playing football compared to my friend plays football. Now you might ask, but what is better? Is it acquired or learned language? I suspect that you probably know the answer. In fact, science has shown that it is the acquired language that serves the most when you are speaking or writing. Your learned language controls your acquired language after you have used your acquired language to speak or to write. For example, when you say something like, last night I worked hard, and then you start thinking, oh no, I should put the verb in the past. I should say, last night I worked very hard. You see, the first time you talked, if you've spoken without paying attention to what you were saying, your acquired language was working, was in control. It means that your acquired language has not yet acquired enough power to know unconsciously that you should say, Worked. Last night I worked very hard. As I said previously, the learned language is mostly there to control. And this is what Stephen Kraschen calls the monitor hypothesis. But there is an interesting thing about that hypothesis. We have different ways of using our monitor. We have different ways of using our learned language. Some use their monitor all the time. So they might say, last day when I met my friend, my friend, in the bar, we discussed. That's why it is good to not try too much to control what you are saying. You should use optimally your monitor, your learned language. Now, let's talk about another hypothesis. The input hypothesis. This hypothesis answers the question, what nourishes or feeds your acquisition machine? And the answer is comprehensible input. Do you remember that? In other words, every time you understand something in English, you feed your acquisition machine with grammar, new words, and new ways of speaking or writing. This hypothesis is the most important of all the hypotheses, and we have started working according to that hypothesis since the beginning. Now, not all comprehensible input feeds equally your acquisition machine. The comprehensible input must be really interesting to you, to the point that when you're reading or when you are listening to it, you don't feel like it is another language. You understand it. It is so interesting. When you are having the comprehensible input, you must be in a state of low stress. This is what Stephen Kraschen calls the affective filter. This hypothesis says that the more interesting and the less stress you feel while exploiting comprehensible input, the more the input will feed your acquisition machine. The last hypothesis of Stephen Kraschen is that we do not learn from output, we learn from input. That means that you become really better at speaking, not by speaking, because speaking is output. You do not become a better speaker if you speak more. You can become a better speaker if you read more, because reading is input, or if you listen more, because listening is also input. Remember, the hypothesis says we do not learn from output, we learn from input. Speaking can come after, but you need first input. And the best way science has found until now to get input, comprehensible input, is reading. Not forced reading, but fun and free and interesting, very interesting reading. And that is what I will talk about in the next video.